Something tried luring me and my friend into a basement. Hello Reddit Paranormal, I hope you are all doing well. I recently discovered this subreddit and have slowly began realizing that I have a lot of paranormal stories I can share with you. Tonight, I want to retell a story telling that happened about 15 years ago when my parents were the night cleaners for the Keg restaurant in Toronto, Ontario. For your information, I posted this story about a year back, and since then, I think my storytelling and writing skills have improved enough to give this story justice on how actually creepy it was. You can skip the next paragraph if you don't really care about the background as to why my parents were working there. Growing up, we did not have much money, and as a result, to make ends meet, my parents and uncle who was living with us had to take an extra job. This particular job happened to be a night cleaning job at the Keg restaurant on Airport Road in the city of Toronto, Ontario. My parents did not have someone to watch us younger kids, so often we would tag along and just sleep in the restaurant or car. Like I said, we were poor. Even though the job paid well and it wasn't exactly backbreaking labor, my parents still quit because of all the supernatural and strange phenomena that occurred while working there. I'll start with the first and most important paranormal story that happened to me and my uncle's girlfriend at the time. It was around 3:30 a.m. and the restaurant was fully lit. In distance, you can hear the conversation between my father and uncle talking about the recent soccer match. I, who was about 11 at the time and was sitting at a table near the bar with my uncle's girlfriend, just talking and trying to pass the time. At some point, like most nights, we both nodded off and were usually woken up by one of the parents telling us it's time to go. Well, this particular night was one that I'll never forget. My uncle's girlfriend and I had nodded off beside one another when we were both suddenly woken up by my uncle. My uncle, who is normally a very happy-go-lucky guy, shook us both pretty hard and told us to wake up and follow him to the basement. He said he needed help moving something out of the way and it was urgent and it involved my mother. Her and I quickly jumped up, gathered our things, and started to make our way to the basement. In the few moments we have turned to gather our things, my uncle was now a good 20 feet in front of us, urging us to follow him, and it's an emergency. My uncle's girlfriend and I look at each other, pause, and ask ourselves what's wrong with him, and what is the emergency? Well, at this point, we had both lost sight of my uncle. Her and I started to look around the restaurant and could not find him. What happened next is what really brought terror, yes, terror, to everyone that night. As we were looking for my uncle in the restaurant to lead us to the basement, we turn a corner and bump into my uncle, the exact same uncle who had woken us up and told us to follow him. When he saw us, it looked like he saw the most terrifying thing possible. We asked my uncle, "Hey, what's the emergency?" He responded with, "You two, your dad yelled at me telling me you two were trapped in the basement and he could not open the door. He told me to go to the car and get a crowbar to pry the door open." We both looked at each other and said, "Uncle, what's going on? Just a minute ago, you woke us up and told us you needed our help to open the basement door because something happened to Mom." My uncle replied, "That's impossible. Your father and I were walking past the basement locked door and heard you and you yelling for help. Your dad tried to knock the door down, but couldn't, so he sent me outside to get something to pry it open." It was at this point that my father came to where we were with a few objects in his hand that he was planning to use to knock the door down. He looked at us and started scolding us, telling us it's not funny to scare someone like that, and asked how we got out. We explained to him that it was my uncle who had woken us up, that we were following him when we lost track of him, only to bump into him and recap what everything up to this point was. The four of us are standing in the restaurant, looking puzzled, trying to figure out what was going on. Just as we were about to continue with the work, my mother, who was on the other side of the restaurant, comes running towards us, saying that there is someone trapped in the basement, that she can't get the door open and needs help. There is no words I can use to describe the look on our faces other than pure terror. We all knew, except my mother, that something was trying to lead us into the basement. That there was something trying to separate us. After a few minutes of shock, we finally collected ourselves and decided it was best we all stayed in the same room for the rest of the night. Fair to say, my parents did a half-assed job that night and got out there as quickly as possible. Sorry for the wall of text. If anyone is interested, I can tell a couple more stories, including what we believe to be a poltergeist stalking my mother a whole night, and my uncle almost getting killed by being tricked into a deep freezer. The creepy doll in my grandmother's basement. I am new to this site. I have read several stories and they all seem to be very interesting. The one I have is creepy, and it bothers me from time to time. I live 2 houses down from my grandmother, who has lived in that house well over 30 years. I am now 31. In the basement, when walking down the stairs, at the end, you come to a wall. To your left is the laundry room, a bedroom, and to the right another bedroom, where one of my 6 aunts lived. She has always had a love for clowns, and the 2 bedrooms have an adjoining closet that you can slide open and walk into the other room. Well, my aunt has a 4-foot porcelain face doll that has a creepy smile and look on its face. When I was younger, I had to sleep in the opposite room, and the 2 doors to the closet had been removed on the one side, so I got a pretty good view of the creepy clown doll. One night, when I was 15, I stayed the night, and the doll was on the left side of the room. It stormed that night, and I swear to God I saw it in a different place with every flash of lightning. And when I woke up the next morning, it was on the right side, just 2 feet from the closet, sitting in a position where it was staring at me with that evil smirk. To this day, it is still down there, and even my mom says it has moved from time to time with nobody physically moving it. And to this day, I will not go down there alone. Sorry if this has been long and boring, but to those people that hate clowns, I hope to be hearing from you and for you to share your experiences with me. Negative comments are welcome. I'm not easily offended or get mad either. Thank you. Little girl in my basement. This all started about 4 years ago, when I was 15. The first experience I had with the ghosts in my basement was when I was sitting on my computer when no one else was home. The television had been turned off, so it was just a black screen. Out of the corner of my eye, and in the black of the TV screen, I saw a white figure next to the couch that seemed to be moving up towards me. Thinking it was my brother, I turned around to tell him something, but no one was there. Freaked out, I ran upstairs into my room and waited until my family got home to come out. At first, I was the only one who was experiencing any paranormal activity. I would hear a little girl say, "Who are you?" when I was in the basement, or I would hear footsteps and see shadows. Since my dad and I are huge fans of ghost adventures, my parents just said I was getting too wrapped up in the show and trying to create my own experiences. However, a few months later, after I had stopped mentioning these experiences to my parents, my dad started to hear things too. One night, when he was home alone, he threw the laundry basket down the stairs when it was pitch black dark and heard a little girl say, "What was that?" He also began to hear screams, his name being called, and a little girl repeatedly asking who he was. This was the extent of the activity for the next 3 years, and it wasn't until this past year, 4 years after the activity first started, that the activity began to escalate. This past summer, my cousins had spent the night, and we were sitting in my room talking. I began to tell them about weird things that I heard in the basement, when all of a sudden, there was an extremely loud bang in the wall. My cousins and I bolted out the room screaming and freaking out. A few months later, I was watching Ghost Adventures with my dad in our living room. The door to the basement is in the kitchen, which is next to the living room, so you can hear what's going on by the staircase from the living room. No one was home, except me, my dad, and my dog. Out of nowhere, my dog started barking like crazy and growling at the basement door. We then began to hear footsteps near the top of the staircase. My dad went downstairs to check it out, but he didn't see anything. This began to happen more frequently and made me more determined to find the ghost in my basement, and made the spirit more determined to get my attention. A few weeks after that incident, this guy I was seeing, Sean, was over at my house and was playing a video game with my brother in the basement. After the game was over, they came upstairs and came to sit on the couch. Sitting there, we heard a loud noise as if someone had fallen in the basement. Being that my brother and Sean were too afraid to go downstairs to see what it was, I went down there myself to see what had made the noise. Aside from the fact that the lights were all on, even though they had shut them off when they came upstairs, there was a box lying in the middle of the floor. Where the box had been originally, it would have been impossible for it to fall on its own like that. Freaked out, I put the box back and called out to see if anyone was down there. With no response, I went back upstairs and proceeded to make fun of them both for being too scared to go down there. 2 nights later, I was watching a movie with Sean in the basement when my dad let my dog outside. Sean asked if my dad had let the dog in the basement because he had heard running behind him. Even though I was a little scared, I just continued watching the movie and pretending like nothing had happened. Soon, we started talking, and as he was talking to me, he kept looking behind me with a freaked out expression and seemed pretty on edge. Knowing that he not only doesn't like to think or talk about anything paranormal, I began to get really nervous. So I jumped off the couch and asked him what he was looking at. In the midst of my question, I stopped mid-sentence after noticing a flesh-colored figure dart across the room out the corner of my eye. I didn't even have to say one word before both of us ran upstairs. A few weeks later, I was sitting in the basement alone when I heard a little girl laugh in the pantry area. Not wanting to run away from it, I again called out to see who was down there, but got no response. I figured whatever it was had left. I went in the shower. Suddenly, I heard a little girl humming right outside the bathroom door. I turned off the water and waited for it to start again. When it didn't, I turned the water back on. But just as I turned it on, the humming started again. At first, I thought it may have been the pipes for the hot water, but in all these years that I had used that shower, it never made that noise. Also, it sounded distinctly like a little girl either singing or or humming something softly. However, when I asked who was down there, I didn't get any response. Since it is difficult to hear or see spirits without any devices, I plan on buying a lot of ghost hunting equipment and trying to record and capture whatever it is in the basement. However, almost everyone I tell this plan to says it's a bad idea, as it may anger the spirits and cause a darker energy to come in. Do you guys think this is a good idea? Or do you have any clue as to what could be in my basement?